So it just became, they will do, in other words, what Bernanke is saying, we will flood the markets with as much money as we have to kickstart this economy again. Now, I'm actually, for the record, I was in favor of the bailout because we didn't have a choice. We didn't have a choice. If we did not bail out the banks when this all began, we'd be in the Great Depression right now. We wouldn't be at the end of the Great Recession. We'd be in the Great Depression. However, I think the part that we as Americans and Canadians have such a problem with was the way that the banks on Wall Street dealt with the funds that they received. They received the TARP funds. Then they didn't loan out any money to consumers. They squeezed consumers through higher credit card rates. Credit card rates have gone up 2% since TARP happened. And higher bank fees, which have also gone up approximately 4% overall with the banks. So then, when the first thing the banks did, now just picture a lot of these stocks, a lot of these big banking stocks that go from, let me use $100 as a number. They go from $100 down to $20. They get all this funding, and they go from $20 to $30. The bankers pay back the government, and then what they do is they go, oh, the value of our stock went up 50%. We have to reward ourselves accordingly. Do you understand why there is such frustration? I'm taking it and I'm breaking it down, 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 so you can understand why there's so much frustration. Okay? So try being a $100 a share person who's lost 70%, and the bankers have just given themselves the biggest bonuses ever on Wall Street. Okay? Meanwhile, while all this is going on with the collapse of Lehman Brothers, I have several properties in Western Canada. Some of you have actually been with me in that whole program, where all payments are current. And Toronto Dominion Bank is nervous about what's going on in the United States. They decide to call all land deals, all development deals in Western Canada. So even though all payments are current, everything got called. I was wiped out, not only myself, a number of other people. So that's why. And I didn't see it. I didn't see it. You see, I'm connected to world events, but it doesn't mean you're always right. And what happened in my philosophy at the time, what I explained to the people who were close to me and all my shareholders was, look, I see what's happening in the United States with adjustable rate mortgages, stated income, stated document loans. They're called liar loans. I understand that. Canada has a much more conservative banking system. And they just didn't loan out money. So I just do not see the banks, and their balance sheets are much stronger. So I don't see the banks in the United States or in Canada doing what we'll get overly concerned about what's going on in the United States. And you know what? I was wrong. I was wrong. Now, the other thing that we talked about is Ireland. You said that, because I want to make sure I touch on all the big stories that are happening right now. Now, first of all, what country, before Ireland, what was the country that was getting all the attention in Europe because of the debt crisis? Greece. Greece was getting all the attention because the bondholders in that country were getting very concerned that Greece could make its debt payments. So what did they do? When there's higher risk, what do the bond investors demand? Higher interest rates. So the rates kept going up, going up, going up. Then the European Union was concerned that Greece couldn't make payments on its debt. So they had to step in. And what's happened in Greece is we've seen massive austerity cuts. You know, yes, in Western Europe, you could support the government programs, maybe in places like Germany. But what happened when the European Union formed, a lot of countries that were Eastern Bloc and countries like Greece go, well, if they have it in Germany, we can do it for our people too. Do you know in the last 20 years there hasn't been a single Greek politician that's been charged with corruption? Yet, it's one of the most corrupt countries in the European Union. And what's happened is the Greek people are now rebelling, they're out in the streets. But let me tell you, socialism does not work. And Europe is a perfect example of socialism not working. So what? They have to cut the working age from 62 down to 60 in different countries. All right? And they're out rebelling in the street. I read last night, Britain is cutting 500,000 civil servant jobs. Good for them. There's not a rite of passage that you simply, because you live in a country, that you should be fully provided for. And Europe is finding that out pretty hard. And I think that in the United States, we were moving too much towards socialism. And the backlash over the last 2 years under Obama has been severe. Where Obama has basically, where the country has said, look, we don't want to move that much, where government is involved in everything that we're doing. So what we have now going on with Ireland, now Ireland actually didn't want to take the money from the European Union. They've agreed to take it. But why didn't the Irish want to take the money from the European Union? If they're going to give you $22 billion, why won't you take it? Can anyone tell me? Strings attached, major strings attached, like the Irish had ticked off the rest of Europe because their taxes were lower than anyone else. So what happened was all the big corporations were moving to Dublin. And that was really upsetting the rest of Europe. So what's going to happen now with all this money coming in is they're going to say, look, you're going to have to raise your taxes. And there'll be a whole pile of other things. Let me picture. Take a whole country where the housing market is similar to Las Vegas. Las Vegas has the #1 unemployment rate in the United States. Las Vegas has the highest foreclosure rate in the United States. The second highest is in California. There's a city in California, 1 in 35 homes are in foreclosure. In Las Vegas, no one is even close to it. 1 in 25 homes here is in foreclosure. Okay? 1 in 25. So, now, the other thing that's going on the international scene right now is we've got a declining U.S. dollar. Why is that beneficial to Americans when we have a declining U.S. dollar? What happens? Why is that a good thing? How does it help?
It makes our exports cheaper.
Exports cheaper. Yeah. What's the other thing, though? It makes our debt cheaper, too, doesn't it? It makes our debt. If we owe $1 trillion, but then we devalue the currency by 50% over the next 5 years, don't we really only pay back $500 billion? Right? So this is what's actually going on. And so what's happening? What happened? What was the big subject at the G Summit event that happened a few weeks ago? What was one of the big concerns there? What was one of the big concerns? U.S. currency getting too low. Now, why is that a concern to other countries? Why do they care? Okay, raise your hand. Raise your hand. You want to say something? Yes.
Well, the oil sheets don't like it because that means they're getting less money for the oil.
Okay, good. Yeah. What are other reasons? There are currencies pegged to the U.S. dollar. Yeah. You see, what happens is American exports become cheaper, but these other countries around the world, their exports become more expensive. And then they start to complain, we can't compete. Do you know, this is fascinating, the #1 issue in the Brazilian election, this will shock you, was the currency went up too much on the international market. Can you imagine because they have grown so much. They have grown so strong. One of the fastest growing emerging nations on the planet. But their number one issue was the US dollar was going down too quickly. And what they were going to do. What about Japan? Japan's currency rose 14%. And what did they do? Does anyone know what they did in one day? Because the problem with Japan right now, it's still in a deflationary environment. It's been in a deflationary environment for the last 20 years. Imagine buying a house that's worth less than half of what you paid for it 20 years ago. Okay? And in many cases, even much worse than that. So, what's happened in Japan is they sold in one day $20 billion worth of yen to try and drive their currency down. You see, if we get in a situation of a currency war, this is what was a big problem and caused the Great Depression, was so many countries put up trade barriers and currency barriers. And then that's what caused such a slow recovery. So currency is definitely another major factor. Now in the United States, what's the big story here in the United States? What's going on with the banks? Why are they in trouble right now? What? Robo-signing. What's robo-signing?
Fraudulent documents.
Fraudulent documents. What about fraudulent documents? What is it?
All the home loans are based on these fraudulent documents that don't exist. They don't know who owns the money.
Yeah. What happened is, in the United States, they wanted to continue the foreclosure process. So they farmed out the documentation to companies that prepared documents so the foreclosure process could continue. Now, in a number of cases, the documents no longer existed. So what did they do? They created new documents. They created new documents, and then what they did is they took employees who were being paid $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour, and they made them vice presidents of banks. And then these employees were signing, in many cases, well over 10,000 documents a month. And they had to swear on each document that they knew what was there, understood it, and what it was for. And it's hilarious. If you go on YouTube, you can see some depositions regarding some of the robo-signing, where they take these people who are paid $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour, and it shows them where they're saying, well, what was your position? Well, I was the vice president of Bank of America. And so much. Now, the consequences of that is the fact that there are some major lawsuits out there right now. One of the major lawsuits is a $375 billion lawsuits collectively launched against Bank of America. Now, that would bankrupt them. But let me tell you, it's so interesting. Who are the biggest contributors to politicians before they get elected? The banks. Why? For this very reason. What we're probably going to see, I think it's hands down fraud. I think that the investors, the mortgage-backed security people who bought all those so-called AAA bonds, now they can go in and they can actually, through discovery, because it's always been a problem, they can now find out what was the applications that were signed. How was this person creditworthy? How did you ever say they were AAA bond material? They've never been able to get that. They will be able to do that now. But I can tell you, guaranteed, there will be lobby efforts and there will be laws passed, especially now with the Republicans in the House, that will basically protect the banks. And that's what's going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen. Now, is gold going up or going down? Who says up? Who says down? Well, I don't know. I don't know. Why should you own gold? A hedge. What does a hedge mean? Stable. Why should you buy gold? Come on. What are some more reasons?
It's a hedge.
It's a hedge. You see, what it is, if you buy gold at $1,300 an ounce and it goes